Alright, so it seems like you are still watching. This is part 3 of this series. We will be now focusing how to get all the exported texture maps into Arnold, how to connect everything, how to do a few shader overrides. And again, thank you Stuart BUNKELL for providing this VESPA model. And if you want to follow along, all the scene files are uploaded to my Patreon source files tier, as well as all my other previous tutorials. So be sure to check it out. Alright, next up is the leather seating, and I will be using this leather material, which is just a lot faster to get started with. So I'm just selecting this, the texture set, and then I'm going to materials. And I'm looking for the leather sofa, and I'm just dropping that on top of my layer stack. The basic look is already pretty decent. I just need to adjust a few parameters. I think the height maps are just a bit too strong, so I'm just adjusting those. Let's see in the parameters of this height range. Let's just reduce that. And we also need to adjust the normal intensity, which is also found in this material preset. So just that we don't have this super strong effect. And we can also try to play around with the roughness to make it a little bit more reflective. Maybe not just as much. But something like this seems to work quite well. Even the scale is already pretty good. Can maybe go to 4 in terms of scale to just get a little bit smaller pattern. And I think that is already working really well. So on top of that, I want to create another dust pass. So we can just grab it from somewhere else. So I'm just copying this dust as we did before, going into the leather and just pasting it in here. So this will now add the dust on top of this leather, and this works super well. What I want to do though, I want to create some kind of effect that it looks like as if it has been wiped clean. So first of all, I want to create a bit more details on this. So I'm creating a new fill on top of the mask, like that, and I'm just looking for some kind of texture, just like a soft overall. And grunge with grunge wipe dusty. Let's just use that one, drop it in, change the mode to triplanar, like that, so we get nicer edges. Play around with the balance and also the scale to create some nice rough pattern, and I think this will work quite well. We just need to add it on top. Right now this is replacing, so I'll just make it linear dodge to add it. So now we have these several effects on top. So what I want to do, I want to create another paint on top of this, and I want to multiply it. So right now there's nothing in here, so nothing is happening. So what I want to do, I want to look for my imperfections. Yeah, I'm thinking I'm using the smudges. So in the paint, what I want to do here, I want to create my projection. So I'm hitting 3. And I want to change my input, so I'm using this smudges, and I'm dropping that in my image inputs like that. Let's see what the map looks like. We do need to contrast it up to get a stronger map, so let's also increase the whites. Okay, maybe add more contrast. Okay, so this could kind of work. So what I want to do, I want to go into top here, and I want to rotate this, maybe scale it up a little. And then where the seating area is, I essentially want to project this back on. I want to have a soft brush though, so it's not too obvious what I'm doing. So I'm hitting the cement one here and making sure everything is set up properly. Let's go into the mask view. If I paint now, this is not correct. Let's go into the selected. So now you can see I am kind of projecting this on top of this. So this is now what I wanted to achieve, and it's kind of looking like it has been wiped down because it is multiplying this kind of streaky texture with our existing mask. So this is now breaking up, and again you can play around with the overall intensity. You don't want it as dusty, but you want some kind of breakup on this. So now you will see me just replicating a few of those materials in a speed up. So Alright, and now I'm focusing a little bit more on the front wheel because there are several different metal materials, so I just need to make sure that I kind of capture that. So it's essentially 3 different ones. And I will also be just going through it a little bit faster because it's very repetitive and we are reusing the same technique. So I'll be now applying the same material on this wheel cap, and then I'm creating those materials. Alright, so now you can see that I was using pretty much the same techniques for the rear as for the front. I did add a few different materials. I added most of the dust, which I added all over the place. It's the same kind of texture mask. It might be a bit intense here in the back, but I think it does actually work quite well. And I added the leather and we did a nice paint job. So what we want to do now is export those maps so we can work in Arnold to get everything rendering. So what I want to do now is I want to hit Control-Shift and E to open the export dialog. And what I always like to do, I want to make sure that I'm first selecting my Arnold preset, which is the Arnold UDIM thing here, and then change the mode to EXR. Because the nice thing about this is every channel will be exported as linear, so it's quite easy to get things right with color management. So I'm just exporting this to my training folder, and now let's just check what we are actually exporting. Arnold UDIM, so we're exporting base color, metalness, roughness. Let's actually rename metalness to metallic because that is what it's called in the shader. Metallic, roughness, normal, height, emissive. We don't want emissive, so I can either just I can just delete it here, so we just have opacity and all that. List of export, base color, height, metallic, normal, opacity, and roughness 32, and we are exporting in 4K. What I like to do though, I want to export in 8K because the UDIMs, the UVs don't have a very high textile density. And that is all I'm doing. And then I'm just hitting export, and let's just get that done, and then I'll see you in Arnold. Alright, so I'm back in Maya, and as you can see, I do have the same setup. I have my gray base shader applied. It has the same parameters as in Substance. So all we got to do now is import our shader and see what we get. So I'm using the Substance Painter plugin for Maya, and I'm just going over to apply workflow to maps. And then I'm selecting multiple maps. I'm going to my directory, which we just used to export. Let's just find it properly. It was Substance Training Output. And I'm just selecting everything here and hitting select. This will give us our metallic slots, roughness slots, normal slots, base color slots, and height slots. So now I just hit apply. This will create us a material, which looks like this. And what I want to do now is I just want to assign this to my VESPA all in all. But before we want to do this, I want to head over to Arnold Utilities TX Manager. I want to check first what my inputs are. So the default is set to raw, which is not correct. What I want to do, I want to go to Windows Settings, Color Management. Where is it? Windows Settings, Preferences, and then Color Management. And make sure that you have your parameters set up. So I have EXR is set to automatically go to linear sRGB. And all I want to do now is just hit reapply rules to scene. And this will convert all my input maps, which are EXR, to utility linear sRGB. So now I want to hit refresh here. I want to select the no TX files, and I want to create TX for selected. These are 8K maps, so it takes a little bit of time to process that. And then I also want to make sure that my UDIM tags are selected. Right now, they are not coming in with UDIM support. So UV tiling, make sure UDIM is enabled. And I want to do this for all the maps. So UDIM enable for all these guys, like so. And I think this would be the last one. What I also want to do before we get into it, I want to make this view a little bit bigger. That's the main thing. And I want to replace a few things. So for now, I don't want to use displacement. So I'm just disconnecting that. And I don't want this multiple divide node. So I'm just deleting that. And I'm creating maybe an AI color correct just for safety measures if we need to adjust things. So I'm just hooking that up into my base color slot like that. Metallic is connected. I also want to create a range in between just for more control. And I want to use the out color, not the alpha map. So that is a bit more accurate, like so. And for the bump, I want to use the Arnold bump node, the Arnold normal map, which just gives me a little bit more control. So I'm just hooking that up. And the roughness as well, it creates gets an AI range. Again, the reason is just to have more flexibility to adjust materials. Also, the height map is right now connected to displacement, which you can use, but there are some issues, but we will see how this map looks. And last but not least, I want to select everything like so. I want to go to create sets, quick selection set, and I just want to call it AOS for Arnold Object Settings. And in here, I can go to set to Arnold tab, hit add, and go down to AI standard, AI subdiv parameters. Just select all of these, hit add, and close this. I want to set the metric to edge length. I want to go maybe on 5 iterations, and I want to change my pixel error to something high, maybe 10 or 15. Nothing is happening because my subdiv type was set to none. I obviously want to have it on Cat Clark. So now let's update again, and now we definitely should see some subdivided. Yeah, there we go. So now you can see everything is being subdivided based on edge length, and you can see it looks a bit chunky or like broken, but this is expected when you use edge length. So this is now subdividing it for this distance, which is great. And if I go back to shaded mode, you should see our VESPA. So what I want to do now comes the part where I assign the shader. So we just maybe rename this to AI VESPA for just a naming convention. Selecting that, assigning this material, and maybe saving the scene before hitting the render button, and just update full scene once the save is done. So what happened was I was changing the type to UDIM after I created the TX files, which is obviously a problem. So you want to first set the tag to UDIM and then rerun the text manager. So now let's just recreate this. So create text for selected. So once that is complete, we can start again a full render. So update full scene, and now we should hopefully see something popping up. And we do, and we can see that our VESPA is coming in as we had it in Substance. It might be overall a little bit too dark, but this might just be how ray tracing works versus the OpenGL thing. So we can maybe crank up our viewport a little, and you can see we're getting close to the same result. A few things which you can change is, first of all, we need to get our height map working. So first, let's check what happens if I reconnect the displacement and see if things start to explode. And yeah, as expected, things are not working super well. So what I tend to do, instead of using displacement, I will be using it as a bump map. So I'm just disconnecting that again, using my height, and I will go to the normal map, and I create a new AI bump here. And I can stack the normal map with the bump map. So the out value of the normal goes into the normal slot of the bump, and that goes into the normal camera. And the bump map itself is our height map, the red luminance value, and that connects to the bump. So now if I render just the seed here, we should see the height map being applied as well. It's a little bit more apparent, but we can also push it. The default is quite low. So once we push that up, you can see definitely more a little effect here on the surface, especially on the car paint. What we can also do, we can go check our metallic. This is working actually pretty well. We might need to crank it up just a little bit because we want as much contrast as possible in the metallic map, which we now have. And we can also have a look at our roughness map, which is looking like that. And I think we can adjust this. Make sure smooth stepping is on to clip or clamp your values. And just by enabling that, you can already see we get a more reflective paint, and you can really crank it up if you want to by adjusting the range. But I think this already did plenty of work for us. And now what you can see, a few materials don't work, right? So one is definitely the glass material, so we need to fix that. So if I go to my perspective view, I want to first of all hit 1 in the hypershade, and then I want to arrange my nodes nicely like that. And what I want to do then is select the VESPA, and I want to edit duplicate with connections to network. So I'm creating a duplicate shader of this, creating a new tab and adding it to this one. I can also show in and outputs, and then I can rename this to glass like that. And then I just want to assign it to this surface here, which will then get this glass assigned. So this obviously does not need metalness, so I can get rid of that. And it does not need a color, so we can also get rid of that. So all we want to do now is metalness off, base 1, transmission on, like that. So this is now our glass material. Let's see if we can visualize the perspective camera. So as it turns out, I just had to re-export this UV set from Substance. There were some export issues, and then it just worked out of the box. And you can see now we do get our breakup right in here. And now it's just about adjusting our transmission values and maybe adding some kind of little bit of roughness to it just to break things up. And that is essentially all we got to do. So if I go to my main camera, this is now how it looks like. You can see it looks already as if it's working. So we can push our maps a little bit more to really exaggerate that effect. And what I always like to do when I see some headlights like that, I always like to create a light inside it. So I'm creating an area light, and I'm just moving it roughly up to where this light bulb would be. So if I just move and select it, I just move it in front, rotate it so it's front facing like that, and then I just place it on the inside. Something like that. I'm changing the type from quad to disk because I do want to see it, make sure transmission visibility is enabled, and then you can crank up the exposure. Maybe let's go to 8, and then you can already see we do have our light source in here. You can scale it up to really get this effect going. And you can also change the material a little bit. You can add some roughness to the glass as well. So let's see if we disconnect this and make it a little bit rougher. You will see that you get this really nice glowing effect of a light bulb. So maybe that is a bit too much in the roughness, so 0.2. And this is roughly the look. So what I can do now, we can test different HDRIs to just see what we are getting. So let me just switch it out, going to my Sky Dome here, going to my studio and just going to HDRI Haven, and let's find something else. So I have a few maps from Haven downloaded. So what we can do now is let's see what we find. Let's use this veranda lookout, and also this should be coming in as linear sRGB. So render, update, and full scene. Maybe that is a little bit bright in terms of exposure. So let's go into the exposure, go back to 0. And this is now the VESPA rendered in a more RT environment. What I will be doing now, I don't want to render like a really high resolution 4K image of this. I will be going into Nuke now, and I'll be showing you how I composited the shots. Alright, so this is the raw render which I exported from Arnold directly. I don't have any special AUVs for this. I just rendered this in 4K. I added a little bit of depth of field, so you can see it's a little bit out of focus. And that is also, it's using the same techniques as I showed you before. I just want to show you quickly the comp I did on this. So I applied a sharpen just to get a little bit more edge highlights. You can see what it's essentially doing. If I zoom in, you will see that it's just enhancing the edges. I'm grading it a bit to get a bit more contrast, and then I'm hue correcting it to get a little bit more saturation in the blues. So already from my original to the hue correct, you can see this is already the change I did. I did a soft clip to reduce the overall brightness of that highlight of that. You can see what's happening without it. It's not so bright, so I'm just reducing that using a soft clip. And then I'm also reducing the exposure a little bit more using a mask to just isolate the headlamp. I just thought it was a bit too bright, and I just reduced it using an exposure. I lifted the black levels a tiny bit. You can see now, if I zoom in here closely, you will see that it gets a little bit brighter. Nothing too crazy, but just a little bit to get it a bit more photographic. Then I did some chromatic aberration. It's very, very subtle. unless I zoom in a lot, right? So this is obviously the main resolution. So if I disable it now, you can see something is happening on the edges. It's not too apparent. It might be a little bit strong, but I think it works well enough for what I want to do. Then I'm applying an exponential glow on the headlamp, and you will see that it's only affecting bright areas. That's why I reduced the intensity. And I can show you how it looks. This is what the glow is doing. It's glowing a few more areas, but the most apparent one is the headlight. And this will just give us a little bit of haziness, a little bit of glow around these super strong highlights. I'm adding a film grain on top. It's nothing crazy. I always just like to do that a little bit to just add some film grain, which is RGB based. And it just adds a little bit more crunchiness and realism to it, in my opinion. And then I'm applying a vignette just to focus your eye areas more on the centerpiece. And that is essentially all I did. So comparing the raw render to this is the change. It's not too dramatic. It's a little bit more photographic. And this is all I did. For this, I have a few different angles rendered out. You can see this is now this top-down angle, before and after, and then also this close-up like that, which looks like this, and this is the after and before. So it's just a little bit brighter, a little bit of aberration, and again, this was rendered in 4K, so this is why it's so super crisp. And if you have the bandwidth, I will recommend you to do that as well. Alright, so that sums up this whole 3-part tutorial series on how to create this realistic looking Vespa. Thanks everyone for watching, and I will see you in the next tutorial.